Hello and welcome to episode 92 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Of course, I am your host, Rick Doherty. On today's show, we're going to continue our topic from last week. Our good friend Sarah Says is going to be back on the podcast to talk about Haunted Mansion. In episode 91, we heard a lot of your opinions about the ride based on Twitter poll questions. Now, Sarah's going to go over a lot of the history and storyline of the attraction. Before we get started, I would like to ask that everybody who enjoys Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty, that you go to the YouTube channel, watch, like, and comment on videos, and make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. In 2021, we laid the groundwork. 2022, we honed our craft and built a reliable following. But it's 2023 when we're looking to take this thing to the next level. We have a lot of plans for the podcast and the channel, and you can really help us for completely free. It does not cost you a dime to subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're planning ways to cover the 25th anniversary of Disney's Animal Kingdom, the 100th anniversary of the Walt Disney Company at Disneyland Resort, and the opening of the Tron Light Cycle coaster at Magic Kingdom in Walt Disney World. After months spent raising money for CASA of Pinellas County, Florida, in the fight against domestic violence, we are no longer asking for donations or money of any kind. The best way you can help us at the moment is to rate the podcast on Podbean and Stitcher, tell as many friends about us as possible, and watch, like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. It's time to welcome back Sarah Says to the show. Thanks for being here again, Sarah.
Oh, I'm so excited to be back for this one.
So we are just going to totally nerd out today on the Haunted Mansion. We're going to focus a little more on the version in Disneyland, but let's be honest, so much of this is going to also apply to the version at Walt Disney World because they're not all that different and a lot of the characters are the same. If you are a Disney nut and you just love everything Disney and you love all the backstories, I think you're going to love this episode. If you're a casual fan of Disney but you really love the Haunted Mansion, I think this might give you a better appreciation for a ride that you already absolutely love. So, Sarah, I know you did a ton of research on this episode so that I could be really, really lazy and sit back and drink a Coke Zero. So just get into some of the stuff you found. And first of all, tell us how you found this information, because
Oh my gosh.
you have a lot of research materials on this particular topic.
I do. And just a heads up, disclaimer, there are a lot of conflicting ideas and stories and history written throughout the internet and books and things like that. So if my research doesn't match up completely with your knowledge and research, that's totally okay with me. I totally understand. We can discuss it, all of that. But I have a whole library of Haunted Mansion books and things from over the years is what I did most of my research from. Some internet, things of that nature. Yeah, that's like my big thing. I love Disney history in general. So I collect a ton of books about Disney history. And then in the last few years, just specifically books on the Haunted Mansion history because it is really fascinating.
So no flame wars in the comment section. No. Please comment. But
yes,
no flame wars in the comments section. She is not attacking your personal politics on the Haunted Mansion. This is just the information she gathered from her books.
Yes. So yeah. And if I do quote something incorrectly, please do correct me on it because I want to know if I did say it incorrectly. I'm totally okay with that.
And just for future reference, if I ever say anything that you think is wrong, I do not want to be corrected. Just let me continue to think that all of my opinions are the right ones because, let's be honest, it's what I'm going to do anyway. So now, Sarah, take it away on the Haunted Mansion.
All right. Excellent. So as we all know, the Disneyland Haunted Mansion is the OG Haunted Mansion. What you may not know is originally the construction on the building began in 1961. It finished in 1963, but Does anybody know when it actually opened? Rick, do you know?
I do know, and the only reason I know this is because there was a lot of merch very recently. I
That's
believe
true.
it was 1969. Am I correct?
That is absolutely correct. And the reason why it didn't open till 1969 is because during this time, Walt and his Imagineers, some of which were taken away to work on the World's Fair. So there was also a lot of drama, as I'm gonna lightly touch on as we talk about it, because otherwise this is gonna be like a 20 episode podcast. Um, but just a little bit of background on it is it did start out as an idea to be a walkthrough experience. New Orleans Square was announced in 1958, and that was also when they announced a haunted attraction. So we didn't know what it was going to be. They didn't know what it was going to be. Nobody knew.
So I'm just going to interject for a second. All of you people who are complaining about how long it took them to go from concept art to completion of the Tron light cycle coaster in Walt Disney World, think about how long it took them to do this haunted house that they promised. So long construction processes are not new to the Disney company.
Absolutely. So yeah, it took a long time. So it wasn't until it started getting closer to the opening that some of you may have seen online this really cool sign, wrought iron looking sign it has I believe it's like a death bat thing on it. It's a skull with wings. And it's a notice that says, "Notice to all ghosts and restless spirits." And it is basically an ad for ghosts to come and live in the Haunted Mansion. So look, we got some movement going. Maybe they should do that for Tron. Do you want to be sucked into a video game? So that sign appears. So going back in time to the creation of the Haunted Mansion, we have Imagineer named Ken Anderson. And what he did is he helped with many things, but a lot on the exterior of the Haunted Mansion. So he did a lot of looking into plantation houses, things of that nature, because obviously we're going to be in New Orleans Square. The final design that he mocked up, it took inspiration from the Shipley Lydecker House in Baltimore, also the Stanton Hall in Natchez, Mississippi. Please excuse me if I said that wrong. I am from the West Coast. And the Evergreen House in Baltimore. And Rick, didn't you visit somewhere that kind of fits into this whole exterior of the Haunted Mansion?
Absolutely, and I'll get to that in just a second. But now that you're saying one of the places is in Baltimore, I'm going to have to see that the next time I'm there, because I used to live in Baltimore and I could definitely see some of those houses. I've never been to Natchez, Mississippi, or I don't think I have. I might have driven through it or something. And I don't foresee myself heading to Mississippi anytime soon. But if I'm heading back to Pennsylvania sometime, I could stop in Baltimore and see one of the inspirations for the Haunted Mansion in Disneyland. But then I can just keep driving into Pennsylvania like I did earlier this year and head up to Jim Thorpe, which is where there is a mansion, the Harry Packer Mansion Inn in Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania, is the inspiration for the version of the Haunted Mansion in Walt Disney World, because while the Haunted Mansion in Disneyland is a southern Louisiana plantation, obviously Haunted Mansion at Walt Disney World is in Liberty Square, so it's supposed to be in the Northeast, like upstate New York, or in the mountains of Pennsylvania, the coal regions of Pennsylvania, which is where Jim Thorpe is located. So I was there earlier this year when I went up to Pennsylvania, and I'm going to say, just on a side note, Jim Thorpe is a really cool town. There is a lot of great history there, and if you do go there, eat at the Irish pub Molly Maguire's. It is chef's kiss good. Get the pierogies. If you're ever in northeastern Pennsylvania, get the pierogies. Sorry about that side tangent. Back to your research.
Okay. So one of the big debates between the Imagineers and Walt was, do we make the outside of the mansion, is it going to be creepy and scary and overgrown and like a decrepit old haunted house. But Walt, as some people have probably read or have heard, he has a quote that says, "We'll take care of the outside, let the ghosts take care of the inside." So he was very big on wanting the outside to look nice and kept up. So that's what you see today when you are walking past the Haunted Mansion in New Orleans Square in Disneyland. Is a nice, well taken care of manor or plantation house, excuse me, not manor house. I guess it could be that. Another thing that Ken Anderson did was he actually visited the Winchester Mystery House. I did not know this. And he decided, that this was the perfect approach for the Haunted Mansion. But he just needed a ghost story. So as we know, it did not turn out like a Winchester Mystery House. There's a lot of stories on what the story inside the Haunted Mansion became, but there were a lot before that. One was the legend of Captain Gore, which was based on a pirate. There was Bloodmere Manor. And then there was even one that had to do with the Headless Horseman, which I thought was really interesting. None of which we know came to fruition.
It would almost seem like the Headless Horseman would make more sense in the Disney World version because Liberty Square, the Northeast, that's where the Headless Horseman was located. But you're on a roll. I'm sorry that I keep interrupting.
Oh, you're fine. No, feel free to jump in. I don't mind at all. We'll get back to the story later. I'll start talking about more of the story of the house, like the actual storyline as you're going through later. But after Ken Anderson, we got introduced to Raleigh Crump and Yale Gracie, which are two very famous Disney Imagineers. Many people know kind of like Gracie is very much tied to the Haunted Mansion. They worked on it for a while until they were pulled out to go help Walt work on the World's Fair. Fun fact about the two of them is when they were put in charge of making the Haunted Mansion, they actually used the set of the new TV show Zorro that Disney was doing to mock up their ideas, which I had no idea. I thought that was super cool. For some reason, I kind of think I might have heard it on the Imagineering story that they had on Disney Plus, but I don't remember. That was a long time ago I watched that. And they used some of Ken's old storyline, things like that. Ultimately, Walt decides he does not like the walkthrough version. He does not want to walk through. And funny enough, one of the reasons, he was very disappointed with the Sleeping Beauty walkthrough in the Sleeping Beauty Castle at Disneyland. So that was one of his things of like, yeah, I don't think I want to do that. As soon as Raleigh Crump and Yale Gracie go work on World's Fair, we get some more people who come in to work on the Haunted Mansion. And that's Mark Davis, Claude Coates, and Ex Atencio. Is that how you say it? I can never say his name right.
I'm going to try it, and it's going to sound good in my mind, and then I'm going to say it, and it's not going to be right. Existencio?
Yes, I think that, yeah. So please forgive me, listeners, if I say his name weird or I botch it or anything like that. I'm trying my best. So Mark Davis in 1984 creates what we know now as the Ghost Host. There are many other ideas that had come up since then, but this is what sticks. Also, something I thought was kind of cool is as they're putting together the rooms of the Haunted Mansion, which at this time, even though Walt did not like it, is still a walkthrough, just so you know. The portrait gallery that we know today at the stretching room had couches and was very lavishly furnished. And when I read that, I'm like, really? Really? Wow, that's fancy. That's fancy.
All right, that needs to be a lounge somewhere in Walt Disney World or Disneyland. Put it in one of the resorts. Give us that lounge with the stretching room portraits and some nice sofas. I would love it. I would drink a mocktail and have a big pretzel or something there any day of the week.
That would be amazing. I think that's a great idea. Disney, listen to that and then put him on staff and make sure he gets paid for that idea. No stealing. Okay, back to the Haunted Mansion as it is today. We have Existencio.
Why don't you just say Mr. X from now on so everybody knows who you're talking about at this point? Okay. But it's Existencio.
We'll make a comment saying Mr. X. Existencio. Okay, so from now on, side note, when I'm saying Existencio, I'm going to say Mr. X because otherwise I'm going to spend all night doing this. So he becomes our show writer. Another cool little fact I'm going to throw in here. Madame Leota's name was actually Madame Z. Don't know what the Z stands for, but it was Madame Z. So sadly, Walt passed away in 1966. Haunted Mansion still hasn't opened. but it had been over 10 years in development. So now it's up to the Imagineers to kind of figure out, without his say, what they're going to do. They scrap the idea of a walkthrough. There we go. And bring on Dick Nunis, who, I wrote this down. This like totally didn't even have to be in here, but I love his nickname is Hopalong Capacity. And he brings in the Doom Buggies. But yeah, I thought that was amazing. They also dropped the idea. I know a couple people I asked on Twitter what was some trivia about the Haunted Mansion that they liked, and one was that was brought up is that a raven originally was going to be telling the story of what was happening in the Haunted Mansion as you were going through. Well, this was dropped completely and covered solely by the ghost host now. And they also returned to the idea of a retirement home for ghosts. So now we're starting to build more on the Haunted Mansion we know and love today. There are 3 acts to the Haunted Mansion. There is the foyer, and this is where your anticipation is building. This is where we're seeing the unseen spirits and things, and little things are happening here and there, but we're not actually seeing anything yet. Then we move to Leota. That is Act 2. She is basically what brings us into the, as I call it, the netherworld, like Beetlejuice, the netherworld, and we start seeing ghosts. And this second act also includes the swing and wake, or the ballroom scene that we talked about in the last episode, and the attic scene with our bride. The third act is when we're completely immersed in the experience and we are in the graveyard, and it becomes much more of an almost overwhelming experience, and we meet our hitchhiking ghosts. The attraction will officially open, as Rick told us earlier, in 1969, specifically August 9th, 1969.
So both Sarah and I were history majors in college. So I'm going to ask you a question right now off the top of your head, Sarah. What happened first? The Haunted Mansion opened, or man walked on the moon?
Oh, snap. I don't even remember when man walked on the moon, not gonna lie. I think that
I'm going to let you know it was the summer of 1969. The two things were very close to each other.
So did if it was summer that they walked on the moon, then the moon happened first and then the mansion opened. I guess August is still technically summer. I don't know. I don't know, because I don't remember that part of my history stuff. I'm a horrible, horrible history major.
I so badly want to make a joke about where you went to college, but I don't want to do that because I don't want people knowing where we went to college just yet. July 21st, 1969, man walks on the moon, and a little over a month or a little under a month later.
Under a month. It was like 2 weeks.
2 weeks later.
Then the Haunted Mansion opened.
And it has been all downhill for humanity ever since. We reached our peak, walking on the moon, opening the Haunted Mansion, and then just a downhill trajectory since then. I know I keep breaking away from the topic, and we definitely want to get to a lot of this stuff because it really, really is interesting.
Yeah, so that is kind of my very, very, very brief Cliff Notes version of the history of the Haunted Mansion from start to finish. It goes far deeper than that. Please watch the Imagineering story on it on Disney Plus. Shameless plug, because it's awesome. Next thing I want to talk about a little more that a lot of people know and do not know is about, I'm going to talk about the rooms as you go through them, some kind of cool stuff about each of them, and the characters that we meet along the way. Some people, like me, that are diehard Haunted Mansion fans, know who these characters are, and others who may just be learning about it or not as diehard may not know who these are. So let's dive in. So the first one is the portrait chamber, or as we call it, the stretching room. And this is where you start your journey after you've stood in the queue outside. And going around the room, we have the Mr. X character, Alexander Nitrikoff, and that is the man who is standing on the barrel in his striped red and white underwear. And he is described by Mr. X as an anarchist who came to us with a bang one night. I was like, oh, okay. And then the next one, who was also an original character, is Abigail Pate Cleaver, who this one is going to change a lot as we go through the history and the rooms and things, because later she becomes Constance Hatchaway, who is probably much more known and beloved to people now. She is the elderly woman who is sitting on the headstone with her beloved, is it George, I believe? Then we have Hob, Big Hobbs, and Skinny Hobbs, the three men who are on each other's shoulders, sinking in quicksand. And then last, our voted number one stretching portrait is Sarah Sally Slater, or Sally Slater, who I love her poem. It is, "In the swamp, poor Sally Slater was eaten by an alligator." Very sad, hilarious. She actually did not have a name reveal, though. I found out until 2011 when they created another character that was a poet. I believe it's in Walt Disney World. They created a poet character, and she revealed the name of the tightrope walker as Sally Slater, and later they brought on everything else. Another thing you'll find out as well is there may be other stories that you hear about these stretching room portraits, and that is because Disney cast members over the years have created their own stories and they've become their own legend. So you may have heard a completely different backstory than what I told you, and that's okay. Oh, and in this room, we also meet for the first time the ghost host, who is going to ride with us through the whole attraction. And a fun fact that I did not know that I learned today: the portraits, when you are looking at them, start at 3 feet tall and they stretch to 8 feet. So when you're getting off the ride, they're actually 8 feet long. I was like, that's really interesting.
I want to throw in 2 bits of trivia that I know as well. First of all,
Yes.
It is Sarah Sally Slater, correct?
Correct.
The tightrope walking character is the one where the door is going to open and let you into the ride. So if you're in a hurry, if you're trying to bust on that ride, maybe if you're doing one of those every ride challenges or something, you want to gravitate towards Sally. But then, I'm pretty sure you know the answer to this. One Haunted Mansion stretching room is an elevator that goes down, while one of them is a ceiling that moves up. Which one goes up and which one goes down? Sarah.
Disneyland goes down because they had to build a bigger show space and they couldn't fit it all in the one. So Disneyland goes down. Are we talking about Disneyland and Walt Disney World, or is this could be anywhere in the world?
For the purposes of our conversation today, we're only talking about Haunted Mansion at Disneyland and Walt Disney World in the United States. The Disneyland one is an actual elevator. So you are moving down, and if you look at the bottom of the portraits, you can actually see that at Disneyland, how there's a little
it's
curvature.
like bowling. Yeah.
At Walt Disney World, because that came second, but by this point, we're using this word again, the stretching room had become so iconic that they wanted to have the stretching room, but they didn't need to lower you like they did at Haunted Mansion in Disneyland. So they just raised the roof, if you will, to borrow from hip-hop culture, and you don't actually move anywhere. That's just one of those little bits of trivia that I like to throw in there because I know it.
No, that's a good one. That's good. Yeah, I did not realize that the Haunted Mansion in Disney World it got higher. I thought they both were elevators, but Disney World also has a lot more footprint that they could cover, where Disneyland was like, let's fit it into an itty bitty living space. Let's move on to our next stop on our tour here. And that's the Portrait Corridor. And this is different in Disneyland than in Disney World. This is the load area in Disneyland. I believe in Disney World, isn't it? You go through the Portrait Corridor once you're on the ride, correct?
Yes, you are on the ride, and the very first show scene, once you've been on your Doom buggy, is the Portrait Corridor. And here's another quick stop, a little bit of information that I can bring to this. If you purchase PhotoPass and you want to know where the on-ride photo is in Haunted Mansion, it is down the Portrait Corridor. There are flashes of lightning that light up these pictures. The very last one is Medusa with the snakes as her hair, and that will have a flash. So if you're planning on looking scared or Like the one time I wanted to do the Heisman, like whatever you want to do to be on that PhotoPass picture, you want to do it for Medusa at the very end in the Haunted Mansion at Walt Disney World. But like you said, in Disneyland, you're still doing the walkthrough portion of the ride.
Correct. And unlike at Disney World, we do not get an on-ride photo at Disneyland. Boo. Anyway, back to what I was saying. So in Disneyland, we are in the load area. Something kind of cool is as you're looking at the stanchions, as you're walking through this, you'll see there are bats on the top of the stanchions. There are 3 different styles of bat as you walk through, which is pretty cool. And the very last stanchion with a bat has actually been touched by millions of people from all over the world since the ride opened, because it's been there since the ride opened. And you'll see all the tarnish, everything is gone because everybody seems to touch that bat. So next time you're there, look at the very last bat before you get onto the moving little sidewalk to your Doom buggy. And if you touched it, bring hand sanitizer because it's COVID. And also know that you just held hands with a million other people. Pretty exciting. Something else that's kind of cool from the Portrait Corridor that I didn't quite understand I read this on a couple different places and didn't quite understand exactly where this happened. It seems like it was in the Portrait Corridor, but there used to be, when the ride was earlier in its life, had an actual real life Phantom of the Opera actor who would come through the queue and mingle with ghosts as they were, or ghosts, excuse me, talking about ghosts. He would mingle with guests as they were waiting to get on the ride. So that's kind of something that was pretty cool that they used to do.
That is never going to happen again. That is something
Absolutely
that if
not.
you got to experience it, you got to experience something really special, because they are not going to put that much effort into the queue anymore.
Nope.
But boy, was that cool that they did that.
Yeah, and if you want to see pictures of that, I mean, just Google it because there are pictures online because I saw like 3 or 4 different websites I read about that, and then one of the books, which at the end of this, I'll tell you what books I read in case you wanted to read them too. So after we go through the loading area, you get on your Doom buggy. Then depending on which version of the ride you're on, where you're at, you'll either hit a library or the music room. Walt Disney World, there's a library, I believe, and the books are kind of coming in and out like there's a ghostly hand grabbing them. Music room, Disneyland, you can see the outline and shadow of what is supposedly the ghost host playing that little piano there. So that's our next little area. Then we move on in Walt Disney World to the Endless Staircase. That's like the Escher painting, which is pretty cool. I remember the first time I saw that, I was like, why don't I have this in California?
And Walt Disney World also does have the piano playing shadow.
They do. Okay.
Yes. So that
Cool.
is there. They have the ghost writers, but they also have the piano playing. And then, yes, we get the Escher stairs, which is actually the one reason that my wife Courtney actually thinks the Walt Disney World version is better than the Disneyland version, because she loves the Escher stairs. I don't know if they make up for our current lack. Well, we'll get to it later.
So yeah, so we have the stairs, which are very, very cool. I do very much enjoy that scene. Then we have our endless hallway, which has the candelabra floating at the end of it. When it's the Haunted Mansion Nightmare Before Christmas overlay, it's Zero floating down there, super cute with his little pumpkin nose. Then we move on to the conservatory. And this is where we meet another character.
Before we get to the conservatory, I don't
Yes.
remember if this is the case in Disneyland, and I can't speak to it right now. But in Walt Disney World, when you look down that mirrored hallway at the floating candelabra, there is a chair, like an easy chair, in front of that hallway. There is a hidden Donald outline on that chair. You can see the outline of Donald Duck's face. If you pay close attention, most people are looking at the candelabra down the hallway and not looking at that hidden Donald Duck. But it is there, at least in Walt Disney World. I don't remember checking any time that I was in Disneyland because I was trying to get that full Disneyland experience, and you obviously want to look at the candelabra to get the full experience. But if you ride it as many times as I do, sometimes you're looking for those extra little knickknacks. And the hidden Donald Duck is a really cool one.
So it is at Disneyland as well, but it is not a hidden Donald Duck. It's an evil face that's in the chair. At least originally, and they may have changed it, but originally that chair has an evil face because the ride creators wanted the guests to have a sense that they were being watched all the time. So that's why as you go through the ride, so many things have eyeballs and creepy looking faces and things. So as far as I know, it's a creepy face, but it could have changed to Donald in the past or since then. It's been a long time since I've been on it.
So I'm just looking at pictures online in Google, and it appears to me as if this is just 100% my opinion looking at pictures of both of them.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely looks a little different and a little scarier at Disneyland. And the one in Walt Disney World, while I think it's very possible that us fans created the theory that this was Donald and then they just rolled with it.
Yeah.
It is a different one than the Disneyland one. But
Okay.
I think if you look at it, that's Donald Duck.
Yeah. Oh, that's totally not. He even has a hat.
So I do think that at least originally, this is just Google research here, the one at Disneyland was different than the one at Walt Disney World.
Yeah.
That is where we'll leave things off in this episode of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Sarah will be back next Thursday to finish this 3-part conversation about the Haunted Mansion. Until then, have a great week.